Tell me, Bruce, when did you know that you wanted to be in the entertainment business?
I was about, I think it was 10 years old. I was living in Southern California, and my parents there were some friends of our family whose daughter, who was in the business as an actress, a young actress. Her name was Christy Swanson, and she ended up years later becoming the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer in the films and not on the television show. But they were friends of the family, and I saw what she was doing, and I would beg my parents that I wanted to be an actor. And we ended up moving to Florida and far, far away from Hollywood, so it seemed like that wasn't going to come to fruition. And then it turned out that there was starting to be some. There was a point in Orlando where people were saying that it was going to be Hollywood East, where people they were building some studios out there, Nickelodeon being one of them, and I started bugging my parents again to kind of get into the industry, and so they found me an agent, and I started going on auditions, and I did. I was in a McDonald's commercial and did some industrial films for the PGA, and for however fate decides to deal our cards, I ended up with an audition for the new Nickelodeon show. When I think one of the new first shows they did at the studios called Outta Here, and ended up landing it, and that's kind of where it all started. It's one of the, I would say, in the first 3 or 4 gigs that I ever kind of had in the business, so to speak.
Wow, what year was this that you moved to Florida?
My family moved there in I want to say 84. And I bugged my parents for a while, and it wasn't until the late 80s, early 90s, when kind of the entertainment bug started coming back. And I think the Nickelodeon Studios opened up maybe in 90 or 91, because I think I ended up moving to Orlando full-time for the show in, I think, 91, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, June 7th, 1990, just to refresh your memory a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, that was when it opened. Yeah, but obviously, what was your first impression of Nick Studios when you first got there, though?
I was overwhelmed because I had done, like I said, a commercial and some other things, and they were very low budget, comparatively speaking, it seems like, because at the time, the studios were kind of top of the line in the industry, or at least for cable television. And I had never experienced anything like that in my life at all. And I was a 17-year-old kid when I first walked in there, I think, and just was kind of overwhelmed by the building. There were only 2 stages there, but I remember very vividly walking into one of the sound stages for the first time. And when I walked in there, they had the set for Double Dare in there. And I grew up with Double Dare at the time, so I was like a kid in Candyland. Just with all the lights and the rigging and the speed rail and the size of the sets, and it was just kind of a really overwhelming feeling for me. At 17 years old, I felt like I had made it. This is it. I'm never going to do anything better than this.
Yeah, Double Dare did move down there. And did you ever get to meet Mark Summers, first of all?
I did. I met Mark Summers only one time, and I can't remember the timeline exactly because, forgive me, it was 23 years or so ago, but if I'm not mistaken, we shot the pilot for my show on the set of Double Dare,
Mm.
and then ended up getting our own set later once the show was greenlit. But it was sometime right after we were picked up. I believe there was myself and 3 other hosts when we came back, and actually I got like a sit-down, like face-to-face meeting with Mark Summers, and I was a little starstruck because I kind of had grown up watching Double Dare and loved the show, and it was just a cool. For a 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid, it was it felt like I had like hit the ultimate jackpot.
When you first got there, I mean, working the studio, you had it all because the studio obviously changed a lot, but it was kind of like low budget, like you said, until the painted graphics were on the wall. So did it look different compared to Out of Here when it got picked up for full series?
For sure. When we did the pilot, I said it was on the set of Double Dare, but at the time they had moved a lot of the props and the backdrops out. So I think literally it was just some speed rail with some pipe and drape or some black curtains in the background and all the bleachers that they had for that show. And we did it, and it looked bare bones. It didn't look anything like what Out of Here ended up being because obviously it was just a proof of concept at the time. And to answer your question, comparatively speaking, I mean, once we ended up doing the Outta Here show, I don't know if you've ever seen it before. It's kind of hard to come by online, but even pictures, it was really bright. The background of the set eventually kind of had these almost cartoony cutouts of the states, kind of a pastiche on the background, and had a lot of cartoon colors and a lot of the Nickelodeon sort of they had these like all these kind of icon stamp looking sort of characters like rockets and stars and shooting rainbows and that sort of thing that they were using at the time. So it was coupled with that and the States, and it was all really kind of pastel Florida looking colors. So it was very different. The transformation between what we had as a pilot and what the show actually became was night and day for sure.
I'm glad that you said that because that set, it's really fascinating to me. I really, like you said, the state dropouts, and it basically represents the state of Florida, first of all. I was like, yeah, we're out of here in Florida. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think we have to give credit to Byron Taylor, who was the production designer for that set, and a whole lot of shows for doing that too.
For sure, and I think the point of the show at the time that they really wanted to sell the idea that you could come to Orlando and come to Universal Studios and actually be part of the Nickelodeon process, and that's really what our show, at least I was told at the time, was our biggest selling point to be on the channel. And that, hey, we're live from Orlando, we're live from Nickelodeon Studios, and if you come to this park, you can be on the show and you might be a part of the audience and win prizes and have a great time.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So, like, what was a typical day like being on the set there and working at Nick? First of all, like, to prepare an episode, what was a typical day like being there?
We would shoot once we got up to once we had full speed in production. We were doing 2 episodes a day, 5 days a week, and we did a total, I think, of 40 episodes, if I'm not mistaken, if my memory serves me right. So we would generally spend mornings every day. Scott Fishman, who was our director, who ended up running the studios there and is doing a lot of stuff for Spike Television, was really gracious to all of us there. He would invite myself and the other 3 cast members in for creative meetings, ask us to pitch ideas for the show, and none of our ideas ever made it. But I always thought it was cool that he involved us in the process to the extent that we really got a taste of what it was like to be in the business. And he was an incredible. He kind of, to be honest with you, I started off in television, and Outta Here and whatnot, looking to be in front of the camera. And part of my experience that was facilitated by what Scott Fishman kind of allowed me to do there, really kind of inspired me to work behind the camera. I saw what he was doing, and and while I was there in Orlando, decided that I wanted to transition to production work and actually work behind the camera instead of in front of it.
Yeah, Scott Fishman, he is a brilliant guy. I've talked to him on the phone, and he's really intelligent. He knows what he wants, and that I can definitely admire about him.
For sure, I couldn't say enough great things about him. I'm blessed to have worked with him at the time. I think what ultimately did it is that I would spend most of that production week, 3 days of which would be on stage doing the show, and because there was 4 hosts, there was one day where then I would be out in the park in Universal Studios shooting remotes, which is just, segments that didn't involve me being on set. And then the 5th day was the day where the studio taping would include the remotes I just shot. So in other words, I wouldn't be a part of that studio shoot day. So I would spend that time in the control room, just sitting in the back on the floor and watching Scott direct and watching what was happening in the control room. And it looked like the deck of the Star Trek Enterprise to me. And I just remember very vividly sitting in the back of that room one day thinking, this is what I want to do with my life.
I think that's one of the good things about working there. First of all, that inspired a lot of people to do their careers today.
Well, I think one of the things that was great about that place, and even I was friendly not just with the cast of the show, but other producers in the show. I hung out with some of the PAs, and just there was a very familial kind of environment, and it was very creative. I think everyone from top to bottom encouraged everyone, no matter what your kind of status was on your show, to get involved in other places and come in and try and learn other positions or other crafts. And I remember one of the associate producers on my show would frequently go into the edit bay because she was trying to learn how to edit, and the editor was kind enough to spend time to try and teach her that skill. So they were very kind of nurturing in that sense. And I'm I feel like I get the benefit of that as well.
I was eventually going to bring that up at one point. How great was all the staff who worked there? Everyone I talked to said they were just so many, such fantastic people, and one of the best people that they've ever worked with.
Without a doubt. I mean, everybody in our show, not only we'd hang out on weekends, which to this day is rare at any job I've ever had, but there was, I think, because there were people there from New York and people there from Los Angeles and people like me who were locals. We were all kind of displaced, and so kind of we made our own family when we were there together, and there was no egos. It was kind of a new thing for Nickelodeon at the time, and so there was this sense that kind of we were all in on creating this new thing together.
Definitely, definitely. And speaking of going to Universal Studios, that's one of the highlights about being there. You guys were shot in a theme park slash film lot. Did you have a favorite ride to go on there?
It
Any of
did,
them?
and it's gone. And I haven't been. Well, I'll back up a tiny bit. I haven't been back since I worked there,
Mm.
which is kind of it's a bummer. I would love to make a return visit, but one of my favorite things about having the job is that when my day was done, I would sneak out the back door and then run around the park for the rest of the day until midnight, 4 or 5 times a week.
Mm.
This was before, I think the Simpsons ride there is now, but I had two rides that I loved. One of them was the Back to the Future ride.
Hmm.
I would ride it multiple times over. But there's also an Alfred Hitchcock exhibit that was, they had a bunch of different, it was almost museum-like. There wasn't a ride there per se, but they would lead you through a movie where they kind of showed off some of Alfred Hitchcock's most iconic moments, and then you could look at some different vignettes, so to speak, that they'd set up, almost like dioramas, to explain kind of some of the camera and filmic techniques that Alfred Hitchcock either developed or utilized in his films. So, for example, you could walk into a staircase and look up and the whole staircase would expand like in Vertigo, or you would walk into another room and there would be a bunch of sets of binoculars you could pick up and look through the binoculars and look at this faux apartment complex across the way that would simulate some scenes from Rear Window. So to me at the time, I was really kind of starting to discover Alfred Hitchcock, and so I really enjoyed all of that pavilion.
That's awesome because the Alfred Hitchcock, that's one of the things that was definitely good about the Universal because they wanted the fans to go behind the scenes and see and make them a part of the movie making process. I think it was sort of like the golden age of where, film and television was starting to get a boom on our TV screens.
Sure, sure. And, for me, it was just kind of like just figuring out, I was 18 years old, so I didn't really, it was my first kind of experience, at the time, before I was 18 years, I was just starting to experiment with films that weren't easy for me to kind of consume, like Star Wars or Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the first time I'd kind of like gone beyond my kind of kid comfort zone, so to speak, of the film genres I would appreciate.
And one of the things I loved about Outta Here was audience participation. I mean, and so many shows that tape there, they really made the fans be a part of it and have them almost become the star almost. Like, what did you love about having a live studio audience shooting in front of them?
Well, the fun part, and probably at the same time the most um, frustrating part, was that there was an element of the show, because there was 4 hosts, that at the top of every episode, the audience could vote on who they wanted their team captain to be. There was a purple team and a green team, and they could vote on who they wanted their team captain to be. So that would take care of 2 of the hosts. The third host would be the MC of the hour, and the fourth host would be doing these remote segments I was speaking about. The problem was that the producers actually made us lobby these kids and these bleachers for real. There was nothing preset about this. They would give us about 5 minutes before every taping. We each got about 5 minutes where we could go out and sell ourselves, so to speak, to these kids. And, at 18 years old, I'm kind of a punk teenager and probably the most self-conscious years of my life. So I actually cared what a 7-year-old thought of me, and I hoped that they voted for me. And so that was kind of a bummer if you didn't get voted for.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I can imagine that because, you want to do your best job, but still when and kids, they tell the truth. I have to tell you, they are
For
definitely
sure.
honest. Yeah, they are definitely too. But also, was it also a distraction when the studio tour was like a glass tube from up above? Was that ever a problem for you?
Not at all. I never noticed it ever. To be honest with you, I didn't even look at the glass tube very much. I don't even remember if I could see through there, to be honest with you or not. One thing I could tell you though is that the tour at I'm not sure if it was the end or the beginning, would come by the wardrobe room and like the GAC room in the backside. And oftentimes when I would go in the wardrobe room, it was open. The backside was like, there was no wall there. It was just open to tours. And so I would go in there often for a wardrobe fitting, or to at least look at wardrobe with the wardrobe woman and talk about what we were going to, I had to wear that day. And I loved it. I thought it was so cool. I thought it was weird that people were watching me, but who doesn't want to be feel like they're famous? You felt like you're on the red carpet. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was cool, and especially the Gat Kitchen. I mean, were you ever slimed, first of all? Did you ever get the green slime on you?
I did not. No.
I think a lot of people, it's kind of tricky because a lot of people want to have it happen to them, but there's also many who don't want it to have it happen to them. Like, but I think it could have been work for that show, getting green slime on anyone. But
Yeah, no, we didn't do any slime. I feel like I'm pretty sure while we were there, they inaugurated the GAC fountain out front. I know that was out there while I was there. I
slime
don't think it was
geyser.
there when I started.
And also earlier, what you said about Orlando and the whole Hollywood East thing, it was a good time, but unfortunately, it didn't really last that long. Like, from your experience, do you think you have an idea why it didn't really last that long and throughout the decade?
That's a great question. I don't know. I know that when I first started, the studios were brand new and they were really trying to encourage production to come out there actively. I know that they had they had Swamp Thing there when I was there, and there was I think it was some Superman series or like Superboy or
Oh
something
yeah,
like
that's
that.
right, Superboy.
And it's funny because I ended up making friends with some of the cast from the other shows at the time while I was there. But to be honest with you, now that I think about it for a little more, I really think it's probably really is the weather more than anything, and not the heat. It's more about precipitation. Just in California, it rains, in LA especially, there's maybe 14 days of rain a year, where in Florida, you can set your clock, your watch by the afternoon rain shower. 4 o'clock every day, you're going to get a thunderstorm. And it's just hard to shoot anything outside of the studio out there. And I think ultimately that probably is what the production, industry, probably what did them in out there.
Right, I can understand that. But you have all of these good stories to look back on, and you could say like, yeah, it was a good time. Also, another bad thing is that out of here, this it's virtually like disappeared off the face of the earth. Like, do you know why the show has not gotten the proper treatment or did not get a lot of good things when it was on air? Why it's so abandoned after all?
I don't. I mean, I know that at the time we had originally started with one executive producer who left, I think halfway through our production cycle and was replaced. And I have no idea what the reasons were for that. At the end of the day, all I can tell you that is years later, as a producer at MTV, all the producers in the channel and have access to archives across all of the MTV networks. So VH1, Nickelodeon, MTV, MTV2, so on and so forth. And at the time when I was working there, I did my best to try and actually order some tapes out of here from the Nickelodeon archive. And for whatever reason, they're protected. They won't let them out of the archive. So I don't know if it's something that, if there's for some proprietary or licensing reason that they don't want the show out there, or if they just want to pretend like it never existed, or who, for all I know, somebody else, a third party, owned the show, and they simply don't have the rights to let anybody else repeat it.
Wow, that's a bummer. I mean, because first they don't even have to care about it. They could just give it to the fans. I mean, the fans, they still love all those early Nick shows.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
but
there's a lot, especially with our show, because we did so many remotes. We did so much outside of the studios. I remember personally doing remotes on top of the studios. We did a couple tapings literally on the roof of the studio. So there's some looks in the show that I don't think you got anywhere else on any other show that we were doing at the time.
now, do you still talk to anyone from the show? Any of your former co-hosts or any of them?
I sincerely wish I could say I did. For a while, I kept in touch with Mike Evans, who was a good friend of mine at the time. We were inseparable. Back in the day before Xbox, we would go to the mall every weekend and play Tecmo Bowl for hours at a time. And and Tiffany, one of the other hosts, uh, often would have lunch, and I actually kept in touch with Tiffany on Facebook for a while, and just, the years go by, and your life gets busy, and everything you fall out of touch with everybody. And it's unfortunate, but I'd love to touch base with everyone again. But I can say at the time, the four hosts of the show, we socialized a lot together. We had a great time. We had good relationships, and at the very least, obviously we didn't win the Emmys, and nobody's watching the show anymore, but I think if you went back and looked at the show, you'd be able to tell that we were all friends and had a lot of fun doing what we were doing.
Yeah, I could definitely tell that. It's funny because, when you watch a TV show, you think the cast will be so much friends over these years, but still I've talked to many people and they say, well, it's not really like that anymore. Everyone's lives just change.
It is. You just get busy. I've got a wife and two kids and a different career, and it's, you want to stay in touch, and you wish you could have stayed in touch, and yeah, it's probably something I should have stayed on top of a little better.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I hear you. But just to lighten things up, do you have a favorite behind the scenes memory of being there, though, first of all?
I'm searching now, but I used to love Greg Lee, who was the host of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego.
Oh, yeah.
Was the warm-up guy for our show. Meaning he would come out before the show began and come out and almost do a stand-up routine and do some comedy shtick for the audience and just make them laugh and laugh and laugh and get their adrenaline pumping. So when our show started, nobody was asleep. Everybody was alive and ready to clap and enjoy the show. And I just remember every single day, twice a day, every episode, my favorite part of the day was backstage listening to Greg Lee warm up the audience because he was consistently funny. He was consistently energetic. He wasn't just warming up the audience; he was warming me up. I swear to gosh, he's such a talented guy, and he went on to have some success after that show. And I was so happy for the guy.
This is will probably make you laugh. I was recently read an Orlando Sentinel article, and one of the things that you got to do was you got to imitate Vanilla Ice. Do you remember that he was supposed to come on the show or something?
Yes, I do. What did the article have to say? Because I actually do have a funny story about that.
It just said that it was, first of all, you and Kareen, you guys were supposed to maybe interview Vanilla Ice. He was supposed to come on the show, yeah, and you got to imitate him just to get a laugh out of that. Like, that's what it said. It wasn't a whole lot about it, but it just said that one sentence, though, of you.
I don't even remember the part where I get to imitate Vanilla Ice, but actually I remember the interview like it was yesterday, and it's a story I tell a lot. But I interviewed Vanilla Ice, and just as a side note, I remember one of the questions that was off the table was that I could not ask him what word to your mother meant. For whatever reason, I still don't even know what it means to this day. I had guesses, but so it was him and essentially his mix master or DJ, and the question that my producer wanted me to ask was, hey, if I was your mix master, because at the time that's what it was called in the 90s, what would my DJ name be? And his DJ took 2 seconds and looked at me and said, Wonder Bread, which was fitting as hell.
Wow. Did you ever try to rap to him? Rap one of his songs?
Maybe. If I did, I don't remember it.
Yeah, I need to see that, first of all.
No, I'm not going to admit it.
I need to see that because, it's so early 90s. I hate to disappoint you, but the clothes, they're so outdated now, like the fanny packs and the hairstyles back then. I was like, wow, yeah, this is definitely early 90s when you watch it on that little clip on YouTube.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually used to get, I used to have very long conversations about the wardrobe lady. She'd hand me my clothes, and I'm like, I'm not wearing this. This is, even if for the record, at the time, I thought it was ridiculous.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine, but thank God that's out of the way now.
No kidding.
Right. And like you said earlier, you said you learned a lot about being there, but just to touch base on it one more time, do you think your experience being there was a learning process in terms of the work you do now in a beneficial way?
Without a doubt. Because I got to spend time in front of the camera and also got to spend time observing behind the camera, I really, truly feel like that's when I realized that I enjoyed behind the camera work much more. And consequently, as soon as Outta Here wrapped, I virtually jumped in my car and drove to Los Angeles and started working anywhere I could for free. I started PAing around the city, and it took me. How old was I? 18. So it took me about 6 years to kind of get a foothold, but I eventually kind of found some steady work with a production company where I was fortunate enough to learn a lot about the business, and basically spent the last 15 to 20 years kind of building on some of the concepts and some of the ideas I learned at Nickelodeon.
Even though Out of Here is short lived, but how do you feel knowing that it and the whole 90s Nickelodeon thing, like, there's been such a resurgence in the years later? It's made such a positive impact on folks, and it's still loved by many people. How does that make you feel that all these shows were taped there and they're still beloved?
Um, I'm probably part of the least known show that was ever shot there, but it's nice to know that I was part of something that people get warm and fuzzy about. I mean, I get warm and fuzzy about it, so it's nice to know that other people do too. And I'm bummed that it's not there anymore. I kind of want to make a trip with my family back to see the Blue Man Group show, just so I can say, hey, Daddy worked here at one point, and just look around the place and see what's changed and I guarantee you there's something there that still exists that was there the day I first walked in the door, and I want to find that thing.
But when you look back on it, does it seem like a distant memory or for you, or does it feel like yesterday, though?
No, it's definitely a distant memory. I mean, if you ask me to describe a walk in through the front door and tell you how to get up to the second floor or the third floor, I know there's a staircase I went up. I couldn't tell you where it is. I know that when I first walked in this front door, I think it was a double door. You take a left, and that's where the dressing rooms were. And I know that the studio entrance was all down there to the left. But earlier tonight before we talked, I spent a lot of time trying to remember and retrace mental steps through the building. I had a hard time putting them all together.
Nickelodeon, like you said, it's gone. It's now owned by Blue Man Group. But you yourself, would you like to see it maybe reopen one day? Do you think it should come back?
I mean, for selfish, nostalgic reasons, of course. There's nothing I would love more. I mean, just in the same way that I'd love to go and spend Christmas in my childhood home at some point. But, there's business realities, and that's life, unfortunately. And in a certain way, certain things can feel and seem more poignant after they fade. And so there's something about that I can appreciate. But, if I could go recapture the feeling and the friendships and just probably the sense of unlimited, life expectations at the time I had in my life. Yes, if that's the question, yeah. But I mean, sure, I'd love to see it come back, but I don't know that it ever would.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. You can't just go in there and have the magic that once was in the 90s, but still there's something about it that just rang true to your soul. There was almost like stepping into a fairy world and all of your dreams come true, not just for kids, but for adults too,
Yeah, I will say this, that there's definitely a void in television nowadays where the game shows that Nickelodeon had, or the type of programming that they had in the late 80s and early 90s with Double Dare, or you can't do that on television. There was a sense of anything could happen at any moment. There was a sense of cavalier fun. There was a sense of, we don't care what your mom and dad say. We're going to still have fun, but in a way that's not going to make them mad. And I have to be honest with you, to a certain degree, on every TV show that I produce nowadays, there's a little bit of that fun and magic that I think I learned from early Nickelodeon programming that I've tried to put into my shows.
That's awesome. That's what it was about, just being a real average kid and doing stuff in a like a smart but almost not so smart way, you know what I mean? Like a wacky,
Yeah.
fun programming way. Finally, what do you think made Nick Studio so great and special looking back on it?
I would say, like anything, they were in Orlando, kind of pioneers in the new land in terms of
Hmm.
the industry industry and in terms of what was being done in Florida at the time. And I think because there weren't any rules at the time, they were writing the rules. They didn't have anything to conform to at the time. They weren't under anybody's thumb. They weren't trying to do what anybody had done before. There was kind of a sense of like manifest destiny, or like new people in a new land. They kind of could do anything they wanted to, and they did. And everybody was trying to figure out what was good, what worked, what didn't work, and there was just a sense of freedom. It's kind of hard to come by a lot of times in this industry.
Yeah, like you said, sense of freedom, being in Florida, not like LA or New York. There, you guys were just basically do whatever you want. You guys could just learn from your mistakes, and there's no other place like it. Still feel like today, I mean, the tour, the Slime Geyser, just to meet your favorite stars up in front and being in a studio audience, I mean, that's what I think kids should do, and that's why I wanted to create this documentary just to for it to be memorialized and see that this was a special place in a special time.
Well, it's cool. I think it's great that you're doing this, and gosh, it's been a lot of fun kind of to think about things I haven't thought about in 23 years.
Yeah, I'm probably like Mr. Time Travel person, huh?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, I have to say it was really fun learning all those memories from you, and yeah, I have to thank you enough for finally getting to talk to me.
Yeah, sorry it took so long.
Well, I'm gonna let you go because it's been a late night, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your night, first of all.
Thanks, you too, man, and thanks again, and thanks for doing this project. The best of luck to you.
Oh, thanks, man. Absolutely. All right, have a good night.
You too.
Bye bye.